Welcome to yet another episode of CFS Conversations, and we are delighted to have with us Robynne Anderson, who is the coordinator of the CFS Private Sector Mechanism. Yes, you heard that right. We even have private sector represented within CFS, the UN global platform that coordinates policy responses to critical food security and nutrition issues. Robynne, welcome to the show.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Waiganjo, especially during such an important historic week.
Exactly, and you've put it right. It's historic in many ways, Robynne. First of all, millions, probably billions, can't access the right type of food as we speak, right? And we're here, we have brought ministers, we have brought the private sector through your mechanism, we have brought civil society, everyone who matters is here. But for private sector, what's your assessment of the global food crisis?
Well, it is really a crisis, and all of the delegates who were here from the private sector, and we had more than 100 here in person, as well as about 170 online in total, from countries and regions all over the world, and all of them report back the realities and the concerns about the food system right now. So we have more and more people, as you said, potentially, we suspect, pushing over 1 billion, who are really struggling with food security in this moment. And whether it's food inflation in a country like Canada, where I'm from, or whether it's frontline hunger in a country like Yemen that's facing incredible conflict, there are so many people who are concerned about their food right now. And well, they should be. So that's why we need to be here and working together.
Indeed, working together, Robynne. And for people who may not know, why is there a private sector mechanism with CFS? What is this private sector mechanism?
Well, the people who actually grow the food, fish, and create the food that we're talking about should definitely be at the table. So we have many fishers, ranchers, people who are farmers in the mechanism who are active in these discussions. And then when you think about once that food is produced, how does it move through the supply chain, right? All the way through to get to people's plates. There are private sector actors. It could be a tea cart lady in Bangladesh or a big multinational food processing company. Every part of that is part of the supply chain. But the actual delivery of the food comes from people like us. And that reality means that being here is very important, because if you want to talk about things like responsible agricultural investment, if you want to talk about gender empowerment, if you want to talk about youth, we need to be part of that conversation. Think about the power of the youth negotiations we just had. Those youth are our future farmers. They are our future employees in the companies that are part of our chain. We had 40 youth delegates as part of our delegation, and every one of them was such an exciting spark of engagement. And here we are talking about these incredibly difficult and daunting issues. But the bright light of this CFS was the youth component and young SMEs who are thinking about starting their new businesses or have just started their new businesses, young people who want to be the future agricultural engineers and the leaders of the digital agriculture sector, and a next generation of farmers, because the world's farmers are aging. We need to recruit youth into the agri-food sector. And so truly the great moment of hope through this CFS has been the thread of this wonderful youth component to this year's discussions.
And I'll emphasize that the great thread of hope during this CFS has been the presence of youth. And I agree, and I mentioned this to you, Robynne, having your youth delegates deliver the statement was not only heartwarming, but filled me and a majority of other delegates with optimism. But I move from that, Robynne, and go to what are some of the exciting things you're seeing being done by members of your mechanism to respond to the crisis, to support those who are worst affected?
Well, some of them are so extraordinary and moving. We had a meeting a few months ago, and we have two very large companies, Cargill and PepsiCo, who both converted part of their operations, their headquarters in Poland, to receive refugees and actually made them sort of into like hotels to cope with the influx of people who were fleeing conflict. So that's very frontline. We've had companies who've been working on trying to move grain into different places where, you know, they might have had a traditional market and they know there's a need somewhere else. And there's been so much demand right from COVID all the way through to the developments of this particular year in 2022 that have really forced the food system to be so nimble. And I know it's easy to see all the challenges that we're facing and how difficult it has been and how much pressure there is on the system. But if you work in this business every day, you know, it is around the clock right now, and it has been so complicated, and things that used to work well just aren't working well, including our climate, right? We've had more crop failures in different places and extreme weather events. It just is so complicated right now to actually get food into people's hands. So that commitment to go a million extra miles to try and keep going when it would be easy some days to say this is just bizarre and impossible to do is, I think, part of what we can all be proud of, even though there's so much more to do.
I like that message of optimism, Robynne, that you have pivoted to, and probably we need that a lot more now than ever before, including in the plenary discussions that are going on now. And I'll move to then what the role that CFS plays is from a private sector mechanism perspective, or private sector players perspective. Are we doing enough? The voice you bring in, the conversations you have with members, what's your take of those conversations?
Well, I think the power of CFS has always been its convening power, right? When you were talking about having all these different stakeholders present here with the member states, it's not a conventional UN negotiation, though there are moments that are definitely conventional UN negotiations. But the power is having all, you know, this 1,000 people who represent all support parts of the supply chain from our side, but also we have the academics, we have the philanthropists, we have the NGOs and the indigenous people, we have this great range of actors, and that is the power of CFS. And I think sometimes, we were just talking about it in plenary today, that we underutilize the power of having us all together. And even in the face of this global crisis, there is a global crisis response group, and through CFS, we have a whole range of actors giving information to the UN to help them understand which countries are evolving their food security concerns. And, you know, we have things like food banks in that group reporting on where there are spikes in food bank challenges. Our groups are reporting on things like the harvest in this area has been less than was anticipated, or in a few cases we've had some good news despite some dramatic weather. Or, you know, we're seeing a spike in use of a product like broken rice that might not be as commonly fed, but it shows that there's, you know, a shortage and we need to get some attention on that. So just being in a situation that we can provide a little bit of help to the UN in the face of this incredibly complicated situation, I think is something we want to help with.
Robynne, you describe it as a little bit of help, but I think that's a modest way of putting it. It's a lot of help that you're offering, not only to the UN, but to the global community, especially at a time like this. You had it. The private sector is part of the solution. And as Robynne has put it, there's no better place to converge than at the UN Committee on World Food Security. Robynne, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Waiganjo.